Hey, welcome to Dream Aloud with Kendra. It's a podcast for Black women who want to live limitless lives. Be inspired by others who have dared to step outside of their comfort zone to live their hopes and dreams and passions. Now let's get started because life is way too short not to live the way that you want. I want to thank everybody for joining me today for the live stream portion of my Dream Aloud with Kendra podcast. And today for our series on second acts, I have the music lady. Her name is Mrs. Josandra Jones James. And I love the title, The Music Lady. She said that's what they call her there in St. Thomas. So next time I come to St. Thomas, I'm going to ask people, who do you know who the music lady is? I know her too. So I want to welcome you to this forum, welcome you online. I'm glad that you accepted my offer. I know we had to go back and forth. You said, no, I'm not going to do it. But I think you have so much to give, so much inspiration for people who just want to follow their dreams that I had to have you on. So that's why I kept stalking you until you said yes. So I'm glad you said yes. And I want to welcome you to Dream Aloud with Kendra.
Thank you. Good to see you, Kendra.
I'm so glad that you said yes. So when I was about to write your profile, the bio, so that everybody would know that you were coming on and what we were going to talk about, there was so much. There was so much to write. I was like, okay, I'm just going to give a little highlight, and it still turned out to be a really long list, and we never even covered most of it. But when did you know that you were a musician, the person that music was what you wanted to follow?
I was very young, in fact 12 years old, living in Mispa. I had been taking lessons maybe 3 or 4 years by that time. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Charles Mallory came to my parents and asked their permission for me to come and accompany the choir at St. John AME Church.
Okay.
Because they did not have a pianist at that time. So my parents agreed. And then a year later, Mr. Mallory stopped coming. And so I had to assume the position of the church musician and the choir director.
Wait, so he was the choir director?
Yes, Mr. Mallory.
And you were there to play, just to accompany them. And then
he left. he left and left me to assume the, the responsibility of being the church musician as well as the choir director, and of which, of course, that was the adult choir, of which your father was in, by the way. And here I was then 13 years old, and I was the choir director, which I loved doing. It was a little scary at first, but then I got accustomed to it.
So you were 13.
Yes.
And this is one thing that I forgot to say. I did say in the bio that you are from my hometown, which I've learned from Reverend Wade to call the metropolis of Mispa, because it is a wonderful town of families that know each other. And it's a real community of people who for generations have known one another and operate as a family. So as a 13-year-old, you were the choir director.
Yes, so the senior choir at that.
Was it just a senior choir, or did you direct?
There was only one choir, just the senior.
And so basically you got the experience before you even applied for the experience. It was there. Absolutely. And you stepped up to the plate. So this series is entitled Second Act. So at 13, you went from from an organist, a pianist that accompanied the choir, to being the director. So you had a nice pivot within the first year.
That's true.
Doing the work. So what did you learn there?
Well, that prepared me so much. First of all, to how to interact with people that I have responsibility for teaching them and preparing them for the Sunday service. So it was a big job, but it taught me a lot. And it also made me realize that I enjoy doing that. So at that age, I knew I wanted to be a choir director.
So at 13, you already knew what you wanted to do for the rest of your life.
Yes.
Have you done anything else between the time you were 13 in music? Besides
Well,
music?
I tried, but then I came back to music. I tried doing real estate at one point, but that wasn't really interested in it. So I came back to music.
Okay. Okay, so you have my book, the Lessons in Legacy book, and you were looking through it. Well, you read the whole thing. You bought the digital copy before you got the hard copy. So I appreciate your support. And then you called me and said, I think I'm on page 54. So isn't that amazing that not only were you reading the book and reading about your hometown, but you're also on page 54. So I talk about in the book the family homestead, and we always have a church that we go to. So St. John is our homestead church in New Jersey, and New Hope, UME, is our mainstead, is our homestead church in McBee. And you've been there too.
Yes, as a choir director, the choir, of course, and the whole church was invited to go to South Carolina, to McBee, South Carolina, to have the service there. And it was basically like a family reunion then, because so many of the members in the church are the family members as well. And so that's how I got to McBee, South Carolina as a teenager. And I loved it.
So what did you learn there? So that means you met my great grandmother.
What? I think so. I was very young. I met a lot of people there. I don't remember which person was which.
Too many people, right?
There's so many people. But I tell you, the best thing for me at that time was the great food in South Carolina.
They love food, right?
Fantastic food. Yes. Very good cooks.
Yes. Yes. So it was Sunday. So I'm guessing you probably had collard greens, mac and cheese, fried chicken, and rice, probably dirty rice.
Oh, yes.
And gravy.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been, usually when we go, they would make chicken and dumplings too at the church. You're like, you would be so full.
Full course meal. Full course meal.
Because breaking bread is one of those traditions of the African culture. And we brought it north. And St. John is a lot like that as well.
Absolutely.
There's the food, there's the fellowship, and you become family.
That's true.
So, you know, I just want to get into, where did you go to college?
Well, Glassboro State College, which is now
Rowan.
Rowan, that's right. I always try to remember that. Yeah, but when I went there in 1960, it was Glassboro State College.
And did you graduate Oakcrest High School?
Oh, no, Oakcrest was not built when I went to high school. I went to Vineland High School. We did not have a high school in that area at that time. However, after I finished and got my BA at Glassboro State, Oakcrest was built, and that was my first assignment. I started teaching at Oakcrest High School in 1964.
So in 1964, you were a music teacher, instructor?
Yes, I was a choir director and music educator, and that was my first professional job. And of course, I had gotten very prepared after having 3 or 4 years with the church choir.
That's cool. So you had training before you even got to high school. Did you do any music in high school as well?
Very much so. I was very busy because my music teacher in high school did not play piano. She was a voice major. So once she found out that I had piano skills, she asked me to be the piano accompanist for the concert choir in high school. So for 4 years, I accompanied the concert choir in high school. And that too prepared me quite a bit because she gave me quite a bit of responsibility, many times teaching the parts, the sopranos, the altos, the tenors, and the basses, and then accompanying all the concerts. And so when I graduated from there, I knew for sure that's what I really enjoyed doing. So I majored in music at Glassboro after high school.
And you were a seasoned pro before you got to.
Not quite. Had a lot to learn.
So tell us about your teaching at Oakcrest.
Oh, I loved Oakcrest. I have to say that Oakcrest was my best teaching assignment.
I'm a fellow Falcon, so
yes. One reason too, it was such a beautiful facility. It was set up for music with a real choir room, a real band room, a beautiful auditorium. And it was just set up just perfectly. And also at that time, I say it was my best because at that time, the students were so respectful. When I would come into the classroom, the students would stand up and say, "Good morning, Miss Jones." Very, very respectful students. I never had any discipline problems with the students there.
So this is the first that we have people that are joining us. So I'm going to mute them. Seeing Jean is here. And then you have a 707 number. So I just muted them just to make sure that we can continue.
Okay.
A good friend of yours, and you wanted her to join. So she's on listening.
Oh, hi, good.
So for those of you who don't know, Jean Kearney is on. She's a friend of Josandra Jones.
Actually, she's my best friend. She's from elementary school. She's my best friend from elementary school.
And not only is she your best friend, but she's my cousin. So
I know.
Everybody knows that my family is huge. So she's Jean McFarland. Her maiden is McFarland, and her parents are featured in my book as well. I just can't separate the family and the community from my recollection of everything that's gone on. So I just wanted to invite her into the room, and we can speak to her a little later as well. So how did you go from Oakcrest High School to Newark, New Jersey?
Well, although Oakcrest was my best assignment and I was there for 3 years, I realized that the following year I probably would have been tenured. And I really wanted to continue with my graduate work. And living in South Jersey, Glassboro did not have a graduate program at that time in music. So I had to get closer to the graduate program where I wanted to attend, which is Columbia University in New York. So at that time, I resigned from Oakcrest High School, like I said, although it was my best teaching assignment, and moved to North Jersey. I moved to North Jersey to Montclair. And that way I was much closer to Columbia University because I did my graduate work part-time while I was continuing to teach in North Jersey.
So what do you say to people? Because some folks feel like they've arrived. You had a nice job at Oakcrest, you liked it. You could have stayed there forever. Was there a burning inside that says there's more? I know there's more.
Oh, yes. By the way, one of the burnings was I knew I wanted to go to Africa. And I knew I wanted to study African music. So I figured once I did my graduate work that I would, continue and then continue with studying African studies in Ghana. So that led me.
So I just want people to understand. I get this all the time. You've done so much. You're doing so well. Why do you want to do something else? Why do you want to put yourself through this? But I feel like if you don't follow your dreams, if you don't follow your heart, then you spend your time thinking about what could have happened, what should have happened. So I don't want to be a part of the shoulda, coulda, woulda club. And it sounds like that you are not a part of that. So what do you say to someone who has a nice job and all of that? If they know, like you said, you knew you wanted to go to Africa, you wanted to study African studies. What do you say to that person who may be a little stuck because they're stuck in their comfort or they're afraid?
Well, I would say they have to think about the fact that if they haven't followed their dreams, later on they'll have regrets. So I have no regrets. I have no regrets. And it was instilled in my heart about Africa from my father. My father was a Marcus Garvey advocate, and he always made all of us very conscious of the motherland. He talked about the motherland all the time, and he wanted to get there. He never got there, but my two sisters and I have been there, and I lived there. And my sister Barbara, who also did African studies at Columbia, and my sister Marcia also, both of them have been able to get to Africa and fulfill at least my father's dreams, although he was not able to get there.
So let's talk about your sisters for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Wheeler, your
Yes.
older sister.
That's correct.
My dad they dated, and that was his girlfriend all the time. When she'd come up, he like, hey, Barbara.
That's right.
She went to a boarding school because she excelled in education, and she went to Columbia, but she was a professor at Kean in New Jersey, Kean University. And she would have these tours to Cuba and to Africa to follow. They were African American studies, and they were following the tradition of Western African people. And I so wanted to go, but I think I was in high school, and then I was a single mom, and I was in college. So my funds were not such that I could go, but I would hang on her every word when she would come back to New Jersey. She would come to our community center, and she was a board member on the Inland Human Services.
That's it.
And she would just tell us about history. And I'm a history buff, so I love history and I love stories. So I was saying, one day I'm going to go on these trips, but I finally made it to Cuba. But when I stepped on the soil, I thought about her and all that she taught. And so you told me that you went on a couple of her trips, and she would tell you, step lively.
Oh, yes. Yes. That was always fun, especially when we went to Ghana and Egypt. And there were 40 of us. I think, out of the 40, 10 of us were family members. And by the way, she said that was her most difficult trip, when there was 10 of us family members with her.
Family members, because you don't listen.
We weren't listening always to her. So she'd have to really get loud about stepping lively and keeping it moving on the tours. But we had a great time, and they were real educational trips. They were not just for pleasure, but also educational. And of course, she is one of my great inspirations as well, because she, as I said, did international studies, African studies at Columbia University first. And then I followed her and went to Columbia as well. In fact, we lived together at Columbia. After I left New Jersey, I stayed with her for a while as well. And that was a great experience, because we got to bond a little bit more, because she was a little older than I was. So she had gotten married and away. So once we lived together at Columbia, we got to know each other much better, and we traveled a lot. And in fact, one of the reasons I had the experience of knowing people when I went to Ghana is because my sister was very much involved with the United Nations meetings and this kind of thing. And we went to a cocktail party, United Nations, and there I met some African musicians who were playing the music at that time. And one of the musicians was the brother of the family I went to in Ghana. Because when I told him that I planned to go to Ghana, he gave me a letter and, of course, gifts for his family. So that was my opening to get to go to Ghana. And it's always good to know someone where you go.
So you stayed with his family when you moved to Ghana?
Not really. I stayed on campus at the University of Ghana. However, every weekend I'd be with them, and on holidays I would stay with them as well. But no, I was really on the campus at the university.
But you had a family that set you up before you.
Very much so. And that's so important in the African culture, to be introduced by a family, because it's kind of a closed traditional society. So when you know someone and they introduce you, you have a much better, time and much better opportunity to really know the culture, because they took me everywhere. you know. Well, actually, I was doing my research there anyhow. So I visited churches, I interviewed musicians, I went to schools and did interview. I was marching around with my tape recorder and my camera. And, but the fact that I was introduced by this Ghanaian family, that really helped.
So how long did you stay there?
I was there for 1 year. I planned to stay another year, but my father had passed away the first year I was there. So I came back. So I didn't finish my doctoral studies there, but I had gotten so much that I was able to come back and still share what I had in terms of the information that I'd gotten in terms of studying the history, the culture, the dance, and the music.
So let's talk about that. So I'm a griot. I love the storytelling, but griots also include poets and musicians and dancers.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you to be a griot. We didn't talk about that, but I believe you to be a griot. And you said you walked around with your tape recorder, and I'm sure you wrote about the music and the culture. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, when I went, I had written a grant. Well, I was at Columbia at that time as a graduate student. And to make my case that I needed to go to Ghana to continue studying, I'd written a grant that emphasized the fact that I wanted to know more about the African culture and specifically Ghana, because I had read a book by Professor Nkatia, who was an African musicologist. So many of the books that I was reading were written by Europeans who had a different kind of perspective on the culture. Whereas when I found this book by Professor Kwabena Nkatia, that really encouraged me. And so I wrote him and told him, that I was really interested in coming there. And then I wrote a grant of which I got the money to go. Actually, wasn't a lot of money. It was just $2,000 at that time. Mm-hmm. But interesting enough, that $2,000, because in Ghana, with the exchange rate, I was able to live on that for the whole year.
That's awesome.
With the exchange rate that they had there at that time.
Brought all of that culture, the information, the things that you learned back here.
Yes, I did. And I continued teaching about African music in the schools. One of the reasons, as I said, I wanted to do that because I have to say I was kind of deprived of that throughout my education. Was all European, only classical music from the time I was in elementary school till graduate school, only European music. Even one time we had a course called World Music, but it had nothing in it about Caribbean music, nothing about African music. And I said, no, I need to change that. So I wrote a curriculum. In fact, when I taught at Essex County College, I taught a class on, actually I wrote a course and taught a class called The Black Experience in Music. And that was in 1972, 73, 74, I guess. And also started the first gospel choir at Essex County College.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when we think about Africa being the cradle of civilization, all music comes from right there.
Absolutely. The roots are right there.
You can find it in Caribbean music. You can
absolutely.
You find it everywhere. And the fact that it had been erased is amazing, number one. Number two, how do we make sure that we bring that all back into everything that we do? Because music is the soundtrack of our lives, right?
Absolutely.
And music soothes the soul. It is universal to everyone. How do we make sure that, I don't even know that we need to make sure that, maybe it's just that we take pride in our music and ensure that our children know that. My whole thing is about legacy and knowing who you are and whose you are and all of the great things that have come from your culture, no matter who you are. But as Africans, and those of African descent, I find it quite disheartening that in 1970, there was nothing here in the US that pointed that back. And you wrote a curriculum. Are people still using that curriculum?
Yes. And of course, things have changed because don't forget the amount of demonstrations there were in terms of Black studies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that made a big difference. That made a big difference. The amount of demonstrations that students had said they want to have more Black studies so that they would be included in the curriculum. But as I said, I didn't have that opportunity. And even when I was in undergrad school, I mean, I don't remember even us singing any spirituals, let alone gospel.
Not the spiritual.
No, it was only Renaissance music, classical, 18th century, 19th century, romantic, maybe a little 20th century. But thank God for my church experience and also for the experiences that I had in terms of the church as well as in school, because in high school we did some spirituals, but in college I don't remember singing any spirituals actually. But teaching at Essex County College, that course, I said, I used the information that I had applied in Ghana to be able to start that course of Black history of music, and of course the roots being from Africa.
Awesome. So I want to go to St. Thomas, where you've been for a long time. And this is kind of where I remember you coming back home and sharing your music at church. Yes. When you would come to visit. But I want to touch on just one thing. I know Marsha's watching. I saw she was on there. She said she's so glad to be watching her Mispa family. But she got married. I don't even remember what year it was, but she got married at First Baptist Church. And that was the first Afrocentric wedding that I had seen.
1980.
Did you do the music? I don't remember the music. I just remember there were breaks.
I did the music.
You did the music?
Yes.
And so where did you start in planning the music for her wedding?
It wasn't African music, but was R&B. Mm-hmm. It was R&B, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But where did you start? You just did her.
Well, what happened was her husband requested certain songs, and so I went with that, the R&B. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I don't remember, I remember they had braids, and they were wearing some African garb, and there were African traditions. So let me just see if the music wasn't, because if it was 1980, I was 10, but I do remember that. And I was saying, at some point I'm going to go to an African wedding. Like that was the closest I'd gotten to. And so I've been watching all these Nigerian weddings. I was like, they have a party among parties. So I think I saw Ilamosi on here. So she, her father is the Nigerian chief of his community. So a couple years ago, I was invited to her wedding. So I got the opportunity to actually be a part. And I was like, thank you for letting me check off one of my things on my bucket list. So that was awesome. So I just wanted to make sure that I covered that. So, and like you said, your father instilled that in all of you and you carried that out.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So let's go on back to your next pivot. So after Ghana, you came back to the US. What happened after that?
Well, that's when I started teaching at Essex County College, and sharing the music, the African music there. Yes. And actually, before coming to St. Thomas, I lived in California, in San Diego. And that too was an interesting experience because I was teaching part-time. And part-time at San Diego State College and part-time San Diego City College. And I was hired by the California Council of the Arts to do assembly programs in which I would go into the classrooms, well, actually in the auditorium, and they'd bring children in and I would teach them African songs and dances and about African culture. And it's interesting, that year in San Diego, they actually laid off a lot of the music teachers. That was around that time that they were having, financial difficulty, laid off physical ed teachers, music teachers, art teachers. And since I had a specialty in African music, I was hired to do the assembly programs.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that, for about a year, as hired by the California Council of the Arts, because they tried to make that at least something that the children would have, other than having music in the classrooms.
Going back to the wedding for a second, Maddie Walker Wadsworth says she was in it. She was in the wedding.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So
then from California, that's when I moved here to St. Thomas.
Okay, so from California.
Yes.
What prompted the move from California to St. Thomas?
My best girlfriend from graduate school is from the Virgin Islands. Okay. And she was living here. Well, we met in graduate school, in New York. However, she was now back in St. Thomas, and she encouraged me to move here. Although I had visited the Virgin Islands about 6 times before I moved here. I started visiting Virgin Islands in 1970.
Okay.
And I moved here in 1982.
Okay. I came to St. Thomas for a sorority event. It was the Eastern Region tour, and we went all over. And I don't know why. I think you were in the States, because this was like it might have been 2000, somewhere in there, but you were visiting the States because it was.
Oh, yes. Every year I would come to, of course, to visit my family.
Yeah. So you weren't around, but like, as I asked you, did you know my soror, Mary Harley? And you said you know her well. So
very well. Yeah, she's in one of the choirs, the church choirs that I've done consultant work with. Since after I retired, I did consultant work with Moravian Church, Lutheran Church, and various churches. I do consultant work with their choirs. And she
as our director. And I think we were at the governor's house. I can't remember, but there was a dinner there, and there were some musicians. They were young, and I wondered if they knew you, but there were so many people that I didn't get a chance to ask. So you have some comments here. So Ronnie Wheeler says, she said you research original African music for her wedding on the Nile.
Oh, yes. When we went to Egypt. I forgot about that. Yeah, because she was married on the Nile. Yeah, but we were on the ship. That's true.
So I've done the Nile cruise too. I recommend it for everyone. How many times have you done the Nile?
Oh, I just did it once.
Just once.
I just had one. Unlike my sister Barbara, who took her students on tour, and probably 14, 15 times, because that was kind of tradition. She would take them to Egypt and Ghana and what have you. But again, during that time, I was very much into my teaching and so many responsibilities. I couldn't always travel when she traveled.
So one thing I want to ask you about, so we went to Aswan. That's where the Nubians live. And riding down the Nile on their taxi to their village. And the music is the same, the drum is the same, but they were clapping on 1 and 3, and we clap on 2 and 4. West Africa, do they clap on 1 and 3 as well?
No. West Africa, you would hear 2 and 4.
And that's where we get that from.
Right. I think with the Egyptian, their influence is quite different. Quite different from the West Africa. Yes.
I noticed that right away. Like, oh wait, they're clapping on 1 and 3, but the rhythm was still the same. The
1 and 3 is more European.
Okay.
The accent on 1 and 3 is more European. The primary beats. African rhythms are on the 2 and 4, the secondary beats.
Okay. So let's get back to St. Thomas. You've been there for how long now?
39 years.
And how many places have you taught?
Oh my. When I first moved here, I was interested in opening my own school. And I eventually I did, but the first year I didn't know a lot of people. So, I had to build up clientele. So I taught in the elementary school first, Emmanuel Benjamin school, and then I taught Ivana Dorican High School most of the years, 20 years, and retired from there. And then I taught at the University of Virgin Islands for 17 years, part-time, before retiring 3 years ago now. 2018, I retired from the Virgin Islands, University of Virgin Islands.
Congratulations.
But throughout that, I had my own studio, Jones School of Music. I had from 1983 until 2003, where I taught voice and piano.
Okay, so you teach voice and piano. Do you still teach?
Not now.
Not now. So when you retired.
Well, 54 years of teaching, that's professional teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And if I count the years when I started at St. John AME, that would be too many years. So I'm fully retired now.
So what do you do for fun now?
I play tennis, I have swimming, and my husband and I are just enjoying retirement. He's enjoying hearing my piano playing, and we do our walking. But the main thing is taking care of my health. Yeah. Both of us concerned to make sure we take care of health, and sometimes that becomes a full-time job.
Yeah, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Totally understand. But that is your life. And just what you just told us is a perfect example of there are no coincidences. That was that prodding at 12 to come and accompany the choir. Then Mr. Mallory is gone. And you become the choir director at 13. Mm-hmm. With confidence, you stepped up and decided to do it. There are so many people who would say, I'm not qualified, or I don't have the time, or I don't know how to do this, instead of just figuring it out. So that's one of the reasons I chased you down, because I want people to be inspired and encouraged to step out and do what you know to do. The rest will come. If you don't always have to see the whole picture, but just go in the direction of where your heart leads you. And if it turns out that it's not something that you want to do, you can always make a pivot and move on. And so you just kept pivoting and you pivot. So what's your advice to someone who may be scared to step out, or someone who like you, may be younger than the people that they need to lead? What is your advice or your words of wisdom to them?
I would say continue to follow your dream, pray about it, and by all means prepare yourself. That's so important, because it is important to feel confident as to what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. So that's why I continue to pursue my education, so that wherever I traveled, I knew I would be able to handle that assignment.
Yes. And so I'm trying to think of the quote, because I love quotes. Is that where prepared and opportunity meet, mm-hmm. that's where you'll have success. So you have to be prepared. So if there's something that you want to do, that you love to do, study it, learn some stuff, because anybody could have said, I want to be the choir director, but if they can't play, then how can you do that? So you need to follow some of your dreams, follow some of the things, and then you'll find out what you're good at and what you're not good at, and then you can move forward. So Patty Nelson Sample says, hi, Joe.
Oh, hi, Patty.
So
hi, Ronnie.
Yeah, Ronnie and Marvella, Maddie, Marcia, Linda Gatling.
Hi, Linda.
Wonderful. We have lots of people watching. They're interested. So does anybody have any questions she's here to answer. Follow your dreams. But I always ask the same question of each of my guests. And so there's two, but the first one that I ask is, what's your favorite quote?
Well, my favorite explains my life, in which if I can help somebody along the way, I feel so good, because that has been my joy, to see how my students have developed and really done so well. So that's always been in my heart, to always help people. And that's what I've continued to do throughout my life.
So because you're the music lady, I was going to ask you what your favorite song is. But the minute you said, if I can help somebody, I know that's a spiritual, it's a hymn.
Well, one of my favorites, of course, is Amazing Grace.
Amazing Grace.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's good. And so why is that your favorite?
Well, when I realized, I loved it all the while, but when I realized it was an African song, then I realized why I related to it so much. Because it's built on the pentatonic scale. Mm-hmm. And it has the pathos and the melancholy pathos of the African idiom. And so that's why you can really feel it at that song so well.
Tell us about the pentatonic scale. So
the pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale that's typical in the traditional African culture, whereas the European culture is diatonic scale, which is a 7-note scale. Mm-hmm. And that's why we know, tracing the history, although the slave captain actually put it to pen, the music was coming from the slaves.
So he heard
he heard them singing it. And then, of course, he put those words to it. But in terms of the music and the beautiful melody that you heard there, that was African.
See, and that's where I was going to know. He wrote it, but the words, but the music came from the hull of
That's
the
right.
ship.
That's right.
Sailing on.
Mm-hmm.
And that music made him turn himself around.
Yes, he did. Mm-hmm.
The power of music got to his conscience. Mm-hmm. They didn't even speak his language.
But he felt it.
Because
it's very spiritual. And that's what I found also with my research, that the African music, first of all, is very functional, and it's very spiritual. It touches your heart. Okay. You can hear in the music a certain pathos that touches you to the point that you know that even if you don't know the language. I taught my students here at Eudora Ken the African national anthem. And when they sing that song, although they sing it in Zulu, you would think they are South African, because they feel that song, they feel it. And even before they knew what the translation was, they had gotten into the song so much. In fact, I'll tell you a story. I don't know whether you have time.
We have time.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you a story about that. One of my students actually in the first class that I had taught that to, in the 80s, I think, when I was here, when that student was in the 80s, was a dancer. And when he learned the song, well, let me just say this. He was a professional dancer, and he ended up on Broadway performing in The Lion King. In fact, that's how I got to see the original Lion King, because one of my former students, Gary Lewis, was in the Lion King, the original. Awesome. So when he auditioned for that role, he had to sing, he had to act, and of course he had to dance, and that dancing was his forte. But the only song he could remember from school was Nkosi Sikeleli. And when he sang the Nkosi Sikeleli in Zulu, there were many South Africans, in that play, and they were really surprised at his diction. And then all said, "Where'd you learn that?" He said, "From my music teacher in St. Thomas." Mm-hmm. And so he got over on his singing Kosi Sikalele. But of course, his dancing was superb because that's what he did, you know. But, and later on, like I said, it was such a wonderful thing because when I went to visit my sister Barbara that particular year, and I told her, I said, oh yeah, we're going to go see The Lion King. She said, well, how can you have tickets to The Lion King? And I've been here and I can't get tickets. I said, well, because one of my students is in it.
So it's good to raise up others.
Yes.
They come back and they remember you.
Absolutely.
So I'm just thinking, if you didn't follow your path, then all of those lives that you touch may not have been touched. So we want to make sure that we follow our hearts, follow your gifts and talents. They always lead to your purpose and your passion. So Ronnie has something else. She said she wanted you to talk about your performance at Carnegie Hall.
That was a comical occasion.
Your own horn. I don't know. That's one of our things. I know we've been raised in humility, but we need to know the greatness that is around us so that we can ask questions now.
Okay, while I was at Columbia, I was auditioned to join a professional choir, meaning that I was paid to sing in that particular choir, not as a soloist, but a choir member. And one of the performances was at Carnegie Hall. And I'm trying to remember, I don't remember what years, I think it was in the 70s, 60s, 70s. And we had a rehearsal at Carnegie Hall in the morning. And then when the rehearsal was over, I think we had the rehearsal like from 10 to 12. And the program was not to start until like 2. Well, I didn't take my concert clothes with me because at that time I was staying downtown. So I said, okay, I'll be able to go back downtown, close to town and change clothes. Well, it was a difficult situation because the traffic was such that it really impeded me getting back in time. Mm-hmm. So I'm in my car coming back, and now in my car radio, I'm hearing, now from Carnegie Hall, the Burn Camp Chorale performing. I said, oh my gosh. Well, that was quite an experience because by the time I got back, they were on the stage, but then I went on for the intermission.
Okay, so you did make it.
I made it for the second part. Yes.
So you have played Carnegie Hall, even though you missed the first half.
Yeah, I missed the first half.
So, you have to stay ready. That's another thing. We want to stay ready. So if we stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So
that's right. That's right.
Lesson. I just had some notes and I wanted to make sure that I got everything. Teaching children. So there's a couple things. My cousin is writing, her daughter needs a teacher. How do you find a teacher? How do you find a compatible teacher? Or do they need to? Do you just expose your children to music? I understand that children who play instruments do better in school and on tests and perform well in school because they play an instrument or they're interested in music. How do you get your children involved? Because I'm sure everybody's not a musician, but there's a part to play. So at what age do you start exposing them and find their talent if they have any?
Well, as early as possible, maybe 3 or 4 years old. And it depends on the instrument. Some instruments are not compatible for very young children. But for piano, at 3 or 4 years old, if they can sit still on the piano stool, that's a good age. But I think parents should actually interview the teacher and ask the teacher some questions before they put their child in with the particular teacher. Because I have had students that came to me later. No, let me just say this. I've had adults who have come to me later saying they were turned off from music by their teacher when they were young. So, and they thought that they could not do music because how the teacher kind of bullied them and made them feel like they were not able. So I think parents need to at least make sure they interview the teacher or even sit in on a lesson to see how that teacher teaches and see the personality, because all students are not compatible with all teachers, especially music. So you have to be careful of that. But the earlier the better, earlier the better. I would say, 3 or 4 years old. My father was my first teacher. He was very much into piano. He didn't play that well, but he loved the piano, and he got my first piano. And then my mother got a brand new piano for me when I was 15. I was so proud of that piano. And I still have that piano. It's at Marsha's house right now in Maryland. And that piano it sounds great. I had it redone over and everything. It really sounds great. So we're going to always keep that in the family. However, my first formal lessons, I think, was when I was 7 or 8 years old. And it was a Caucasian woman in Vineland. In fact, that's how I probably was asked to play the piano at St. John's, because I don't think any other child in Miss was taking piano lessons in Vineland. But my mother made sure I took piano lessons in Vineland. And this was one of the jobs that she had. My mother had many, many jobs, but although she was a beautician and had her own beauty shop and everything, she also did housework. And then that housework was for this particular music teacher. Okay. So she was able to get music lessons for me. And interesting enough, again, I was only, I guess, 2 African-American students that she had. The rest are the other 30, 40 were Caucasian students. And many times she didn't make me feel bad or anything, but I could tell she many times she used to ask me a lot of questions. I think because she was trying to find out more about Black people.
Yeah.
And I thought that she wasted time sometime questioning me when she wasn't supposed to be giving me lessons.
I get it.
But that was my first teacher, my first professional teacher, and she was very good. She was very good.
Okay, so you just need to shop around and make sure that there's compatibility between the student and the teacher.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions or comments. We have a lot of comments to go through after this, and you can go through and answer any that may not have gotten answered at the time that we were shooting live. But I always ask my my guests, but I want to stop for a minute. Go back to if I can help somebody. So that is a hymn / spiritual that people sing all the time. And I think of St. John every time somebody speaks of that song, because Mr. Lundy used to sing it all the time. And so Mr. Lundy was a pillar in our community as well as a member of St. John. So do you remember him singing that song?
Oh, of course, sure.
And he'd get excited and then he'd start crying, but he actually lived it too. And
That's
so
true.
The other thing that I've noticed about Black music, well, the spirituals and the gospel music, sometimes it's the same song with different words. Is that because they didn't read music and they just put new words to it? I know that there's certain songs that has the same melody and everything, and they just changed that. Is that something that I'm just picking up or?
No, that's typical. In other words, don't forget with music of African descent, you have improvisation, and you continue to create. Continue to create. That's the essence of all folk music. That it's ongoing, and people add to it all the time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's typical, and of course, the call and response is typical, as well as body percussion. um, music of African descent, you clap your hands, pat your foot, you know. Also the lips. I remember the quartets, the male quartets that used to come to our churches. They use their lips for percussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know whether you've seen that before.
Mm-hmm.
They use the lips in a percussion. And so all of that is creation, improvisation, continue to improvise things.
And I see that in country music all the time.
Well, that's
Country
also
music
another style of folk.
It's really gospel to me.
Well, there's some element of African retentions in that as well.
Mm-hmm. That's
element retentions, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the nasal tone, that tonality also is typical as well. You have what you call the let me see if I can explain that, not getting too involved. The straight tone versus the vibrato. And the more vibrato in your voice, it will create more emotion. Okay. The first time I tried out for the concert choir at Glasper State, I didn't make it because I didn't know about straight tone.
Okay.
I had to change the vibrato in my voice because that choir director did not want that vibrato, especially singing Renaissance music. And also Gregorian chant, those kinds of things. You have to have a straight tone.
You hear a lot about that when people are auditioning for Broadway.
Yes.
They have to learn to tone it down.
That's correct.
Since we're getting to the end, I've asked Aunt Jean to turn her video on if she wants, and her audio. She turned her audio on, but I don't think we're going to get her on camera. But while we're seeing if she's going to join us, I always ask all of my guests this last question. And it's simply, on whose shoulders do you stand?
My parents and my sister Barbara. I was very much influenced by my father because, like I said, my father was a Marcus Garveyite, which means that he was always talking about going back to Africa. So he made us very conscious of our African heritage. And my mother was a devout Christian who instilled in me the love of God. My sister Barbara also continued to be a role model for me because, again, she continued studying and did her doctorate in Africana Studies at Columbia University. And so I was always trying to see how I could fit my music into the consciousness in terms of African heritage. And that's why I went to Ghana, because the inspiration of my father, the love of my mother, and also inspiration of my sister Barbara.
And we thank you for carrying that on. You always have lovely African garb. You infuse that into everything that you do. And so I'm going to thank you for the culture. If no one else has, I'm sure they have, but I thank you for the culture. And Jean, you have anything to say? I'm putting you on the spot. We know your microphone is hot.
We've been friends since 3rd, 4th grade.
Yes, we have. She's always been the one to pursue education. I pursued a career in the post office and retired from that. But we have always remained best friends.
That's awesome. And so I want to be like both of you and retire and still have a good time because you guys are living it up, doing what you did what you had to do so that you can do what you want to do. And I've watched you both enjoy life throughout the time that you were working and doing what you love. And so that's what this podcast and live stream is about. The podcast is entitled Dream Aloud with Kendra, because I want to see people dream and live out loud. The things that you are supposed to do, your purpose I want to see people walk it out with passion. And so the two of you are an awesome example that you walked in your purpose with passion and enjoyed life. You didn't wait to when I get here, when I do this. You enjoyed throughout, and you made the adjustments and the changes that you needed to make to enjoy your life as you were working through it. So I always tell people, don't wait. Whatever it is, whatever your passion is, follow it. You can do more than one thing. And so go out and follow your passion. If you have a propensity to do some things, if you have gifts and talents, try them out. That doesn't mean that you have to make a living at it, but at least do it. So does anyone else have any questions? So Ronnie Wheeler says, Jean and Wesley, all my love. So she's sending her love to you guys. Just seems that everybody's watching. They're sending hearts and likes. And so I want to thank you for accepting my invitation to do this interview. It was awesome.
Actually, Ronnie encouraged me because I mentioned to her that you wanted me to come on. And I said, well, why would she want me on? She usually has on young women who are pursuing, entrepreneurial things. I said, I'm retired. I'm not pursuing any business right now.
And then what did I tell you? You said, I'm retired twice. And I said, so those were at least 2 pivots, but you started at 13.
True.
You were accompanying a choir, then you became the director, and you could have said, no, I don't want to do it, but you followed that, and that set you up for the next thing. And that set you up for the next thing. So you were already prepared before you got to the next place that you needed to be. So you already knew how to play the piano. So then you were able to accompany the choir. Somebody leaves, you decide, I'm already a leader, and you decide to slip into that. And then you took those leadership skills and all that you had and got your first degree. You realized that there was something missing because your father had instilled the culture into you, and you knew who you were, and you knew of the greatness of African people. So with that, you were able to hone that skill and decide that I need to go to Ghana and figure out what's in this for my people, and how can I weave this story into the music that I share with other people. And we're all the more better. And so I was trying not to cry during the Amazing Grace story, because that is where I come in. I do everything at the intersection of culture, community, and technology. So whenever something hits me, I'm just like, oh goodness. But it was really the song in the hull of the ship changed a man's heart.
That's true.
The music that you share. And that's why we need to be careful. The word says to be careful what goes in your eyes and your ears, because that's what settles in your heart. And
Your heart.
So that's why when folks go to church or wherever they go and the music hits you and you can't sit still, it's a spiritual thing. It's an awesome thing. And it started right there in the cradle of civilization. So Linda Gatlin says, thank you so much for interviewing such a musical legacy. She loves you, Joe. Your friend forever.
Hi, Linda.
And Ilamosi says, thank you, Aunt Joe, for your dedication and legacy.
Thank you, Ilamosi.
And so that, that's my thing. Tell the story and keep the legacy and the fire going. And so I'm a griot, I tell stories, and I want to make sure that the legacy of our story of legacy is continued, and you've been doing the work. And I thank you. So Ronnie says, both of you are phenomenal women. And so I thank you, Ronnie. We know that she is awesomely phenomenal. And I'm going to say thank you for me too, because I plan to just continue to step into that. And so that's what Dream Aloud is for. The second act is really an encouragement for women to dare to pivot and to live, work, and play their way. and I always interview the phenomenal women. And I didn't have to go far because they're all around me. So we're always looking way out to look at people that you don't know, but the heroes that are right around you, you need to interview them. You need to ask questions, because our lives are so much richer just because you have people who can give you the answers right here, right around you. So Talia said, she's talking to Ronnie. She asked her how she was doing. They're doing well. Are there any other questions? I took up a whole hour of your time.
That's fine.
Thank you. We don't have any more time, but I
appreciate you. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Aunt Jean, for joining and speaking.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
All right. Love you guys.
Thank you for listening to Dream Aloud with Kendra. If you like the show, leave a review and tell a friend. I also invite you to join our Dream Aloud Facebook group, where we encourage and challenge our members to step outside of their comfort zone and live limitless lives. I guarantee you will experience true fulfillment when you live, work, and play your way.